Hey there, and welcome to episode 8 of the Cutting Room Floor. This is where I take you a little deeper into something from a recent message here at Sunny Slope Church. And yesterday we looked at a story about it's a sort of well-known story of when the sun stands still as the Israelites are going into battle and into combat. Um, I actually want to take you to something a little bit more big picture today, and that has to do with the question of um, holy war, or is God really commanding his people to go in and destroy all the nations? And we've looked at that a number of times because it's an important question for us to wrestle with. And I always say we don't have to shy away from tough biblical questions. I a couple of weeks ago, it kind of sounds like a joke, but it was a minister and a rabbi that walked into a coffee shop. I met up with a rabbi here in Salem, and we had a really meaningful and enjoyable conversation about some biblical background, and particularly as it relates to Old Testament stuff. And I asked him some questions about the whole idea of God commanding his people to go into the land of Canaan and take it over, particularly as that relates to destroying all these other nations. And we got to talking a little bit about that, and he shared some background that I thought was interesting and even helpful. One of the things that he said is you have to start with the understanding that stems from Genesis chapter 1. And of course, in Genesis 1, which is the opening overture of the whole Bible, we see very quickly that the entire universe is something that is created by God and therefore is under God's ownership. All the land rightfully belongs to God, and therefore it is God's to give to whom he chooses, right? God has the right to do what he pleases with all the land. That's sort of the background of the question of holy war. It's an important reminder that God may choose to give the land to whom he pleases. But there's more, and this was more sort of Jewish tradition that emphasizes that as the Israelites were moving towards the promised land, there were plenty of opportunities for the people of the land that were in the land of Canaan, the Amorites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and the Perizzites and so on. They knew that the Israelites were coming, and they knew that the time would be short, and then God would be giving the land to the Israelites. And what that means is that they had plenty of opportunity to leave without any consequence. They had the opportunity to relocate and to move out of the land without any loss of life or without suffering any consequences. So there were plenty of opportunities for the people who were inhabiting the land to do so. So that's some of the background. But then what he pointed me to was something that I had come across at one point, which I think is rather interesting, and that's in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 20. I'm going to pull it up on my screen here so that you can see what Deuteronomy chapter 20 says. In Deuteronomy 20, essentially, God is laying out the rules of combat for his people. And here's what he says. I'm going to just highlight it here on my screen. When you draw near to a city to fight against it, offer terms of peace to it. And if it responds to you peaceably and it opens to you, then all the people who are found in it shall do forced labor for you and shall serve you. Now, on the one hand, we maybe have some trouble with this idea that the Israelites could just go in and enslave other people. But the other part of it is that anytime the people went up against a city, and anytime there was a threat of warfare from between the Israelites and another city, before any shot would be fired, the Israelites would give an opportunity to forego any conflict and then could become a vassal state. Now, again, we have trouble with this idea of forced labor, but that was pretty well par for the course in those days. Anytime you conquer a nation, you could make them your subjects. What this is showing is that the Israelites had the chance to win victory without shedding any blood whatsoever, and the people had the chance to acknowledge Israel's victory without the loss of a single life. And furthermore, in the course of combat, if the city would choose not to go to war, then would not accept the terms of peace, and they would go to war. If at any point in the conflict the city decided that they were going to lose, they could simply put down their arms and walk away from the combat, and that would be it. So the point is this, that there were always provisions for peace and the preservation of life. Now that really sets apart the Israelites from most other nations, because most other nations had rules of combat that would have been considerably more bloody. They would not have allowed the opportunity for peace without any bloodshed at all. They would not have allowed the opportunity for an unconditional surrender right in the midst of battle. It was usually fight till the death. And so these rules of combat really set the Israelites apart. They actually were aimed ultimately at the preservation of life and the protection. And it was only if the people rejected those terms of peace that warfare would then be necessary. So it doesn't take away necessarily from the challenges of passages like this. Warfare is always bloody, it's violent, it's really in a lot of ways a terrible thing, but the terms that God uses, the rules of combat that God institutes for his people, set the people apart to be a people of that were focused on and intent on peace. Hey, thanks for watching. I'll put a link to yesterday's message here, and don't forget to subscribe and like, and love it if you comment to keep the conversation going. All right, till next time.